In this presentation, I shall introduce National Express for those of you who aren't familiar with us. I'll then set out the challenge of transport with respect to climate change, and then I'll end by talking about our strategy. So, National Express is well known to most people in the UK, particularly because of our national network of coaches that run up and down the country. But we're also the major operator of buses, particularly here in the West Midlands, and we operate two train franchises currently, National Express East Anglia and C2C. Overseas, we have a coach and bus business in Spain, which is the dominant market leader, and in North America we're the second largest provider of school buses. As John indicated, the travel chaos caused by the volcanic eruption has meant that over the last few days National Express and as part of a consortium with Eurolines has been kept incredibly busy. When I checked yesterday, I think we'd repatriated 17,000 people from mainland Europe over and above those that we were expecting to carry anyway. When I spoke to someone this morning, it was 20,000, and probably by this afternoon it will be getting towards 25,000. So something that's been pretty good for us, probably hasn't got very much media attention, so hence my gratuitous plug now. When it comes to transport then and climate change, the whole sector is particularly problematic for two reasons. Transport's probably going to be the last sector that's going to be able to decarbonise. And then secondly, the demand for travel is increasing and emissions and transport is the only sector where emissions are projected to actually increase. Now, before I go on and talk about what we can perhaps do about that, let us not forget that climate change isn't the only externality that you get from transport. Congestion, air quality and broader quality of life issues are really hugely impacted by the growth of transport. And we shouldn't forget that here in the UK, 25% of households still don't have access to a car. And as John's figures indicated, it is very much the car that dominates both thinking and the large provision of journeys is made by them. So I think John had a list of 4 things. I tend to say you can simplify what you can do about the impacts from transport to 3. Firstly, you can look at demand. That's politically very, very sensitive. And the other dimension to that then, and again touched on by John, is you need to look at long-term land use planning issues. The next thing you can look at then is improving the efficiency of the vehicles. Now, this has been the main focus of policymakers to date, but the truth of the matter is historically, demand has outstripped any efficiency improvements we've seen, particularly of the car, because it is the dominant move. We're now looking and hearing a lot about new technology, whether it's hybrids, whether it is electric, but it's still unclear as to what consumers really want from them. Do consumers really want electric cars? Perhaps a point for us to discuss later. And then it comes on to the third one, and perhaps the one that's most interest to us, is modal shift. This is getting people out of cars, or planes for that matter, either getting them to walk, getting them to cycle, and if they're not going to do that, let's get them into public transport. If you want to compare different modes of travel, the metric you want to use is grams of CO2 per passenger kilometre. It's probably not particularly well known still, and probably an indication I've not been doing my job very well, but actually the lowest form of and most efficient form of travel is using the coach. At 30 grams of CO2 per passenger kilometre, using the actual mileage and the actual loadings that we get on our national network, the coach is a good deal better than even electric trains, which typically would come in the range of about 44 to 46 grams of CO2 per passenger kilometre. Now, I'm not going to labour this point long, but last time I looked at it, and last year when we calculated, the average grams of CO2 per passenger kilometre for a car is something like 130. So you get the idea that if the scale of our challenge is something like an 80 or 90% reduction in emissions, with existing technology, we can almost do that if we get someone out of a car and onto a coach. That's not to say it's right for every journey, and I'm not going to pretend that, but clearly there are lots of journeys that we could make better use of public transport. So the most important figure that I talk about when we do our corporate responsibility reports and even our annual reports is not our total greenhouse gas emissions, it's actually trying to estimate what the net savings are. And there is a massive net savings that arise from our operations if you take the fact that if we stopped tomorrow, then people would be left with a choice of either not travelling, and those who did travel would be doing it by far more polluting means. And in that sense, you could actually think of National Express as an offset provider. Philosophically, every time you get someone onto one of our services instead of a car, that is an offset. And so this leads me then nicely on to our strategy. Our strategy should absolutely be about providing great alternative services to the car and growing our services, absolutely dramatically growing our business. Now, as a consequence of that, we will increase our total greenhouse gas emissions, but of course that will be entirely consistent with reducing emissions from transport overall if we're getting people out of cars and getting people out of planes. 2 years ago we produced a document called More is Less, and there's a hint there in the title, which set out our vision for a sustainable transport in a carbon-constrained world in 2020. And at the time, I got challenged quite a bit by environmental journalists and at conferences by saying our challenge is actually to increase our total greenhouse gas emissions, because pervading thought is that everyone has to reduce. For us, we don't believe that's the case, and we've been quite honest because of this modal shift argument. Now, we're not complacent about the need to improve our efficiency, but the truth is the next generation of technology, whether it be hybrids or further ahead electric or fuel cells, aren't yet commercially available. And of course what's really key for us about attracting people out of cars is one of our strongest selling points, or the strongest selling point, is cost. So if we are to invest in exceedingly expensive efficient technology, then we will actually, because of cross elasticities of demand, reduce actually this net saving, because we will dissuade many people from using us, who will then revert back to car, certainly, and certainly we won't be getting them or attracting them out of the car. We are looking at those new technologies, and we will use them when they're available. A lot of talk over the years have been around biofuels, as was presented as a saviour. We looked at biofuels. We've been doing trials of biofuels, and in summer of 1997 we pulled out of a trial of biofuels when we were looking at a 30% blend, because we were concerned about the broader sustainability challenges that arrived from those feedstock. And I have to say, while we would not rule out looking at waste-derived biofuels, I don't think there is any case for us going further down the biofuels route. So we're not complacent. We do driver training. We make efficiency improvements within our fleet. And the ultimate test is for those of you, if you're travelling back by train, which should be about 2/3 of you, if not bus or coach, pop by the new Birmingham Central coach station. It's only about 5–10 minutes walk from New Street, and you'll see there what the Birmingham Post described as the Selfridges of coach station, our modern, fantastic coach station that really, we hope, is going to transform the perception of using the coach, which of course meets BREEAM excellent rating. So ultimately, our role is about providing more and more services, dramatically increasing our services and getting more people out of cars. Thank you.